The drawing room of Thornfield Manor hummed with the refined chatter of London's most distinguished ladies, all gathered for the monthly charitable society meeting. Afternoon sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating silk gowns in shades of rose, lavender, and cream, while servants moved gracefully between clusters of women bearing porcelain trays laden with coffee and delicate French pastries. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We did love to hear from you. If you enjoy Victorian-era tale stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Naomi Martinez had positioned herself in what she considered the most strategic spot in the entire room, a small settee near the east window, partially concealed by an impressive potted palm. From here she could observe the proceedings without being drawn into exhausting conversations about the latest modiste on Bond Street or which eligible bachelor had been spotted at the opera. At 27, Naomi had perfected the art of strategic positioning. Not that she was unremarkable. Far from it. Her rich auburn hair, elegantly arranged despite being done by her own hands rather than a lady's maid, and her striking hazel eyes, had attracted considerable attention during her debut season 8 years ago. But after her father's death 6 months prior had revealed the catastrophic extent of his gambling debts, leaving the Martinez family on the precipice of complete financial ruin, prospects had vanished like smoke. Pride had prevented her from accepting overtures from men who viewed her solely as a decorative acquisition, and harsh reality had kept her from entertaining romantic notions when her family needed every penny just to keep creditors from seizing their ancestral estate. Her younger sister Clara deserved better than to have her future destroyed by their father's weakness. She sipped her coffee, strong and black the way she preferred it, and allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. This was manageable, observing society from a careful distance, fulfilling her social obligations to maintain the family's tenuous position, and avoiding the pitying whispers that inevitably surrounded unmarried women of a certain age whose circumstances everyone knew. That one, a voice declared from somewhere behind the palm fronds, cultured and decisive with an edge of steel beneath the refinement. Naomi's hand stilled, her cup suspended midway to her lips. "I beg your pardon, Your Grace," came another voice. Lady Pemberton, if Naomi wasn't mistaken, with that particular inflection of someone addressing nobility. That young woman by the window. Who is she? Naomi's stomach dropped as she realized with absolute certainty that they were discussing her. She considered standing, announcing her presence, saving them all the embarrassment of being overheard, but something in that first voice, commanding, calculating, utterly self-assured, kept her frozen in place. "That is Miss Naomi Martinez, Your Grace. The Martinez family. Quite respectable, though I understand they've encountered certain difficulties in recent months." Difficulties? The aristocratic voice, unmistakably belonging to someone of considerable rank, Naomi noted with mounting alarm, sounded intrigued rather than dismissive. How fascinating. Do elaborate. "Financial troubles, I'm afraid, Your Grace. Nothing scandalous, you understand. Her late father had unfortunate habits. Gambling, they say, though no one speaks of it openly. But Miss Martinez herself is entirely proper. She's been out for nearly a decade, though she never accepted any offers. Some say she's too particular. Others say—" Lady Pemberton's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow carried perfectly to Naomi's hiding spot. The offers stopped coming once word of the debt spread. Such a shame. She's quite intelligent from what I hear. Reads philosophy, if you can imagine. Her sister is still young enough to make a good match, provided this scandal doesn't— "Perfect," the aristocratic voice interrupted with unmistakable satisfaction. "Absolutely perfect." Naomi's heart hammered against her ribs. Perfect? Perfect for what? Nothing good ever came from being called perfect by a voice that sounded like it could order armies or topple governments with equal ease. The rustle of expensive fabric signaled movement. Footsteps approached, measured, unhurried, inevitable. Naomi set down her cup with exaggerated care, her mind racing through possible escape routes. None, plausible excuses, several, all inadequate, and appropriate responses to whatever was about to happen. Absolutely no idea. The palm fronds shifted. A woman emerged into Naomi's carefully constructed sanctuary with the inexorable force of a battleship entering harbor, tall, imperious, dressed in a gown of pale blue silk that probably cost more than the Martinez family's annual income. Her silver hair was elaborately dressed with sapphire ornaments that caught the light, and her blue eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had navigated the treacherous waters of high society for decades and emerged victorious. Naomi recognized her instantly, though they'd never been formally introduced. Everyone in London society knew Vivian Blackwood, the Dowager Duchess of Silverley, mother to the notoriously reclusive Duke Sterling Blackwood. "Miss Martinez," the Dowager said, settling onto the settee beside Naomi with the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything in her entire life. "How fortuitous to find you here. We need to have a conversation." It wasn't a request. Naomi's carefully maintained composure threatened to crack. "Your Grace, I have a proposition for you," Vivian continued, leaning closer with a conspiratorial smile that somehow made Naomi think of a cat cornering a particularly interesting mouse. "One that will sound utterly mad, I'm certain, but hear me out before you refuse." Naomi's mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed danger, but desperation had made her a pragmatist. She couldn't afford to refuse anything without at least hearing what it entailed. "I'm listening, Your Grace." Vivian's smile widened, sharp and satisfied. "Excellent. Now then, Miss Martinez, how would you like to become engaged to my son?" Naomi stared at the Dowager Duchess, certain she'd misheard. "I beg your pardon?" "My son needs a fiancée," Vivian said matter-of-factly, as though discussing the weather. "Temporarily, of course. 3 months should suffice to silence the predatory mothers and their simpering daughters who've made his life unbearable. You need money. I have it. A simple transaction, really." "Your Grace, I don't think—" £5,000, Vivian interrupted, her sharp eyes watching Naomi's reaction. "Enough to settle your father's debts entirely, with sufficient remaining for your sister's dowry. She's 17, isn't she? Still young enough for a proper debut, provided you act quickly." The number hit Naomi like a physical blow. £5,000. It was salvation. It was impossible. But surely the Duke— "Sterling is in Scotland, inspecting his northern estates. He won't return for 3 days. Vivian's expression hardened slightly. "My son is brilliant, principled, and utterly impossible. He's 32 years old and refuses every introduction I arrange because he won't be paraded like livestock. Meanwhile, I cannot attend a single social function without being ambushed by women determined to become the next Duchess of Silverley." Naomi's mind raced. "Your Grace, with respect, this is madness. When the Duke returns and discovers— He'll be furious, naturally. Sterling detests deception." Vivian smiled thinly, but he's also pragmatic. Once the engagement is publicly acknowledged, ending it immediately would create precisely the scandal he abhors. He'll cooperate, if only to protect the family name. She leaned closer. 3 months, Miss Martinez. You attend a few balls, sit through some tedious dinners, and allow society to believe you've captured the Iron Duke's heart. Then we arrange an amicable separation. You'll have decided you don't suit after all. No scandal, no shame. Just a quiet ending and enough money to rebuild your life. I couldn't possibly— Your sister will be forced into service within the year, Vivian said bluntly. Your mother will lose her home. You'll become a governess at best, a companion to some elderly tyrant at worst. I'm offering you an alternative. The words were cruel because they were true. Naomi felt her careful composure cracking. Before she could respond, Vivian stood abruptly, her silk skirts rustling with purpose. She tapped her coffee spoon against her cup with deliberate precision. The chatter in the room died instantly. "Ladies," Vivian announced, her voice carrying effortlessly across the drawing room, "I must share the most delightful news. My son, Duke Sterling Blackwood, has finally chosen a bride." Her hand descended onto Naomi's shoulder like a steel trap disguised as affection. "Miss Naomi Martinez has done what I feared impossible. She's captured my impossibly particular son's heart." The room erupted. Naomi sat frozen, her coffee cup trembling in her hands, as women swarmed toward them with congratulations, questions, and barely concealed envy. Lady Pemberton reached them first, her eyes alight with gossip potential. "Miss Martinez, how extraordinary! Where did you meet the Duke? He's been so reclusive." "At—" Naomi's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, desperation sharpening her wits. "At a gallery exhibition, the Royal Academy's Renaissance collection. We discovered a shared appreciation for Italian art." "How romantic!" Another woman pressed closer. "When did he propose?" "2 weeks ago," Naomi heard herself say, the lie flowing with alarming ease. "Quite privately. The Duke prefers discretion." Vivian's fingers tightened on her shoulder. Approval or warning, Naomi couldn't tell. The interrogation continued for an eternity. Naomi answered automatically, spinning an elaborate fiction about stolen glances in front of Botticelli paintings and philosophical discussions about Renaissance humanism. Each word felt like a nail in her coffin. When the crowd finally dispersed, buzzing with excitement, Vivian leaned down and whispered, "Well done. My solicitor will have the contract ready tomorrow morning at 9. Come to Blackwood House." Her smile was almost kind. "And Miss Martinez? Sterling returns to London in 3 days. Be prepared. He will not be pleased." She swept away, leaving Naomi alone with her cold coffee and the dawning realization of what she'd just agreed to. She'd just become engaged to a man she'd never met. A man who valued honesty above all else. A man who was going to destroy her when he learned the truth. Blackwood House loomed over Grosvenor Square like a monument to old money and older power. Naomi stood before its imposing entrance at precisely 9 o'clock, her worn gloves concealing trembling hands. A butler answered before she'd finished knocking, his expression betraying no surprise at her unfashionably early arrival. "Miss Martinez, Her Grace is expecting you. This way, please." The entrance hall stole her breath. Marble floors gleamed beneath her feet, and a sweeping staircase curved upward toward floors she couldn't see. Oil paintings of stern-faced Blackwood ancestors lined the walls, their painted eyes seeming to judge her presumption. The butler led her to a study where Vivian waited with a thin, grey man introduced as Mr. Pembroke, the family solicitor. No pleasantries were exchanged. Pembroke slid a thick document across the mahogany desk. "The terms are quite straightforward, Miss Martinez," he said, his voice dry as parchment. 3 months of public appearances as Duke Sterling Blackwood's intended bride. You will attend no fewer than 12 major social events, including the Hastings Ball, the Ashworth Musicale, and Lady Pemberton's garden party. You will maintain the fiction of the engagement before all members of society, without exception. Naomi scanned the pages, her heart sinking with each clause. "Payment will be rendered in 2 installments," Pembroke continued. £2,500 upon signing, the remainder upon successful completion of the 3-month term. His finger tapped a particular passage. "Early termination, initiated by you, will result in forfeiture of the second payment and repayment of the first. Breach of confidentiality carries a penalty of £10,000. 10,000, more than she'd see in a lifetime. The trap closed around her. "Where do I sign?" Vivian smiled thinly. "I knew you were sensible." The pen felt heavy in Naomi's hand as she signed her name 3 times. Pembroke produced a bank draft, already prepared. £2,500. Salvation and damnation, written in elegant script. "The Duke's study is through that door," Vivian said, rising. "Feel free to acquaint yourself with the house. You'll be spending considerable time here. Pembroke and I have matters to discuss." They swept out, leaving Naomi alone with her racing thoughts and the bank draft that felt like it might burn through her reticule. She should leave, take the money and flee before she lost her nerve entirely. Instead, she found herself drawn to the door Vivian had indicated. The study beyond took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with more volumes than she'd ever seen outside a library. She moved closer, reading spines, Locke, Mill, Burke, political treatises on economic reform, parliamentary records, and unexpectedly, wedged between serious tomes, poetry. Byron, Shelley, Wordsworth. She pulled out a worn copy of Lyrical Ballads, its pages soft from countless readings. Someone had made notes in the margins, thoughtful observations in a bold, masculine hand. She was tracing one annotation when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, decisive, wrong. The door opened. A man stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair windswept and coat dusty from travel. His face was all sharp angles, strong jaw, high cheekbones, a mouth set in a hard line, but his eyes arrested her completely, dark, intelligent, and currently burning with cold fury. "Who are you?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And why are you in my library discussing terms with my mother's solicitor?" Naomi's throat went dry. She knew that face from society pages, from whispered descriptions. Sterling Blackwood had returned a day early, and she was holding his favorite book. The book slipped from Naomi's fingers, hitting the carpet with a muffled thud. "I can explain. My mother," Sterling said, each word clipped with barely restrained fury, "has done many manipulative things in her 60 years, but this surpasses them all." He stepped into the room, and Naomi instinctively retreated until her back hit the bookshelf. "You're the unfortunate woman she's bullied into this farce, I presume?" "Miss Naomi Martinez, Your Grace." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "And I wasn't exactly bullied." "No." His laugh was harsh. "Then you're complicit, which makes you either desperate or mercenary. Given your clothing, no offense intended, I'd wager desperate." The casual cruelty stung more than it should have. "Your Grace, I'm ending this now." He turned toward the door. "I'll send word to the papers immediately. An error, a misunderstanding, my mother's enthusiasm running away with her. And destroy her reputation?" Naomi's desperation found its voice. "Make her look like a scheming liar before all of London society. Undermine every political alliance you've carefully built with men whose wives will never forgive such public humiliation of a dowager duchess?" Sterling froze, his hand on the doorframe. "Your mother announced our engagement to 40 women yesterday," Naomi continued, her words tumbling out faster. "It's already in the morning papers. Lady Pemberton alone has probably told 24 people. If you refute it now, society won't blame your mother. They'll call her delusional, unstable. They'll question her judgment, and yours, for not controlling your own household." He turned slowly, his expression glacial. "So your solution is to continue the deception? For 3 months. That's all your mother asked." Naomi fought to keep her voice level. "Then we can end it quietly, amicably. No scandal, no damage. And the payment she's undoubtedly promised you." Heat flooded Naomi's cheeks. £5,000. "Half already given." "Of course." Sterling's mouth twisted. "Let me guess. Gambling debts? A brother's commission? Or simply the allure of easy money?" "My father's gambling debts," Naomi said quietly. "Pride be damned. £6,000 owed to various creditors who are threatening to seize our home. My sister is 17. She deserves a debut, a future, not ruined by association. My mother is nearly 60 and unwell. I'm 27, unmarried and unemployable in any respectable position once we lose our house. She met his cold gaze. So yes, Your Grace, I'm desperate, but I'm not a liar by nature, and this scheme wasn't my idea. Something flickered in his expression, not sympathy, but perhaps recognition of brutal honesty. 3 months, he said finally. No more. Relief nearly buckled her knees. Thank you, Your Grace. I'm not finished. He moved closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. You will follow my rules precisely. No public displays of affection beyond what's minimally required. No fabricating details of our courtship without my explicit approval. I'll provide you with a believable history. You will attend only the events I specify. And Miss Martinez, his voice dropped, became somehow colder. This is purely business. You're being compensated for a service. Do not mistake proximity for intimacy or contractual obligation for genuine regard. Am I understood? Perfectly. Naomi lifted her chin. And you should understand this, Your Grace. I have no romantic illusions about you or this arrangement. I'm here for my family's survival, nothing more. I can assure you, falling in love with a man who views me as an inconvenient transaction is not among my concerns. For a long moment, they stared at each other, two people trapped by circumstance into an elaborate lie, each determined to emerge unscathed. Sterling extended his hand. 3 months, then we're done. Naomi clasped it firmly, his grip strong and impersonal as a business contractor. 3 months. They shook like adversaries negotiating a truce, both absolutely certain they could maintain the necessary emotional distance. Neither noticed Vivian watching from the hallway, a small, knowing smile playing at her lips. The carriage ride to Ashworth House felt interminable. Naomi sat rigid in her borrowed gown, pale green silk that Vivian had insisted upon, claiming her own wardrobe wouldn't do, while Sterling reviewed their strategy with the clinical precision of a general planning a campaign. You told Lady Pemberton we met at the Royal Academy, he said, consulting notes he'd apparently made. Problematic. I haven't attended an exhibition there in 8 months. We'll say instead that we met at the Hartfield Gallery on Brook Street. Smaller, more intimate, less likely to have been noticed. I was there 6 weeks ago, viewing their Italian collection. 6 weeks. Naomi's stomach dropped, but I said we'd been courting. Quietly, for appearance's sake. Sterling's tone suggested he was solving an equation, not fabricating a romance. Given your family's circumstances and my aversion to society gossip, we kept our understanding private until recently. It's believable. He glanced at her. You mentioned bonding over Renaissance art. What specifically? I don't actually know much about Renaissance art. His expression darkened. Wonderful. I said Botticelli, Naomi added quickly, because everyone knows Botticelli. Then we'll keep it simple. You admired The Birth of Venus. I explained the symbolism of the shell. We discovered a mutual appreciation for beauty tempered by intellectual curiosity. Something almost like amusement flickered in his eyes. Can you manage that? I'm not completely ignorant, Your Grace. Sterling, he corrected. If we're engaged, you should use my name, at least in public. The carriage stopped. Through the window, Ashworth House blazed with light, music drifting into the night. Naomi's hands trembled. Sterling noticed. Steady. We need only convince them we're tolerably suited, not desperately in love. Follow my lead. The ballroom glittered with crystal and candlelight. Heads turned as they entered, the reclusive Duke and his mysterious bride-to-be. Naomi felt every gaze like a physical weight. Sterling's hand settled at the small of her back, proprietary, but not possessive. Breathe, he murmured. You look terrified. I am terrified. Then pretend you're not. You're playing a role. Treat it like theater. Somehow that helped. Naomi straightened her spine and smiled. They moved through the crowd like dancers following choreography, greeting acquaintances, accepting congratulations, deflecting invasive questions with practiced ease. Sterling was surprisingly skilled at subtle deception, his answers vague enough to satisfy without providing fodder for gossip. But something unexpected happened during a conversation with Lord Ashworth about the Reform Act. "The current proposals are insufficient," Naomi found herself saying. "Expanding suffrage to property owners still excludes the majority who would most benefit from representation." She expected dismissal, the polite condescension men always employed when women ventured opinions on politics. Instead, Sterling's eyes sharpened with interest. "You've read Mill's proposals?" "And found them overly cautious. Bentham's utilitarian approach to representation offers a more comprehensive framework. Though his calculations ignore the practical realities of implementation," Sterling interrupted, but his tone was engaged, not dismissive. "The greatest happiness principle sounds ideal until you're trying to draft actual legislation." They debated for 20 minutes, oblivious to their audience. Lord Ashworth eventually drifted away, unnoticed. "Burke argues that representatives should exercise independent judgment rather than merely reflecting constituent wishes," Naomi said, warming to the topic. "Do you agree?" "In principle, yes. In practice." Sterling paused, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You've actually read Burke? Not just passages quoted in drawing-room conversations?" "I've read most of his political writings. My father had an extensive library before we had to sell portions of it." Something shifted in Sterling's face. Surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its cold formality. "And what did you think of his reflections on the revolution?" They talked until the musician struck up a waltz. Sterling offered his hand, and they moved on to the floor. His hand at her waist felt different now, less like a prop in their performance, more like genuine contact. "You're more intelligent than I expected," he admitted as they turned beneath the chandeliers. "This arrangement might be tolerable after all." Naomi should have felt insulted by the backhanded compliment. Instead, she felt something far more dangerous, a flutter of genuine pleasure at his approval. "How gratifying to exceed your low expectations, Your Grace." "Sterling," he corrected again, and this time almost smiled. The performance suddenly felt alarmingly real. Hyde Park on a Tuesday afternoon was crowded with society's finest, which made it perfect for their purposes. Naomi sat side-saddle on a gentle mare Sterling had selected, trying to appear comfortable despite her limited riding experience. He rode beside her on a magnificent black gelding, looking infuriatingly at ease. "The Corn Laws are strangling the working class," Naomi said, continuing an argument that had started in his drawing room an hour earlier. "Artificially inflated grain prices benefit wealthy landowners while children starve." "Agreed, but immediate repeal would devastate agricultural communities dependent on those protections." Sterling guided his horse closer as they navigated around a cluster of gossiping matrons. "Reform must be gradual, or you'll simply trade one crisis for another. Gradual reform is a luxury the starving don't have. And radical upheaval creates chaos that harms them further. You're thinking in ideals, I'm thinking in practicalities." "Someone needs to think in ideals, or nothing ever changes." Sterling's mouth quirked. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're exhaustingly principled. You say that like it's a flaw. In politics, it often is." But his tone held something like admiration. They'd been doing this for 2 weeks now, scheduled public appearances that evolved into genuine conversations. Yesterday, Sterling had invited her to his favorite bookshop, a cramped establishment near Charing Cross that smelled of leather and possibility. She'd introduced him to her theory that art served as social commentary, using Hogarth's prints to illustrate urban poverty. He'd listened, actually listened, and challenged her interpretations with thoughtful counter-arguments. Today, as they rode, Naomi found herself watching the way sunlight caught in his dark hair, the careful consideration in his expression when she spoke. It was becoming dangerously easy to forget this was performance. Sterling helped her dismount, his hands at her waist lingering a fraction longer than necessary. Their eyes met, and for a breathless moment, something unspoken passed between them. "Sterling, we should maintain appearances," he said quickly, stepping back. "Lady Morrison is watching from the promenade." Right. Appearances. That's all this was. But 3 days later, when Sterling appeared at the Martinez townhouse with a book, "I thought you'd appreciate Wollstonecraft's arguments about women's education," and stayed for 2 hours debating philosophy over terrible tea, Naomi couldn't pretend anymore. She was beginning to like him. Genuinely, impossibly like him. "Your household is organized chaos," Sterling observed, watching her younger sister Clara chase their cat through the hallway. "We can't all maintain ducal standards of order." "I wasn't criticizing. It's—" He paused, something almost wistful crossing his face. "Pleasant. Alive." The admission felt intimate, unguarded. Naomi looked away, her heart beating too fast. They were careful after that, maintaining proper distance at social events, keeping conversations superficial when others were present. But awareness hummed between them. The brush of fingers when passing a book, eyes finding each other across crowded ballrooms, the way Sterling now unconsciously angled his body toward hers in conversation. Neither acknowledged it. Sterling reminded himself daily that she was being compensated, that proximity wasn't genuine affection. Naomi told herself firmly that he'd agreed under duress, that his interest was intellectual curiosity. Nothing more. But when they attended the opera together, and Sterling leaned close to whisper a sardonic observation about the soprano's acting, making Naomi struggle not to laugh aloud, the careful walls they'd built felt paper-thin. From her box across the theater, Vivian Blackwood watched them through opera glasses, noting the way her son's expression softened when he looked at Naomi, how the girl's calculated composure dissolved into genuine warmth when Sterling spoke. She smiled to herself, satisfaction warming her chest. The scheme was working perfectly, just not in the way she'd originally intended. She'd wanted to silence gossips. Instead, she might have accidentally arranged an actual love match, though neither of the stubborn fools had realized it yet. The knock came at dawn, loud, insistent, and unmistakably hostile. Naomi was already awake, having barely slept, staring at bank statements that refused to make sense no matter how many times she recalculated. Mr. Grimshaw, her father's primary creditor, stood on the doorstep with 2 men who looked capable of removing furniture by force. "Miss Martinez, I've been patient, but my patience has limits. £2,000 by Friday, or I'm seizing property to cover the debt." "The money is coming." "I've heard that before." "Friday, Miss Martinez, or your family will be on the street." He left. Naomi stood in the doorway, watching the sun rise over a world that felt like it was collapsing. The bank draft from Vivian was somehow delayed. Clerical errors, they claimed, apologizing profusely while Naomi's life fell apart. 2 days until Friday. 2 days until everything ended. She began gathering items in the dead of night. Her mother's pearl necklace, her grandmother's silver tea service, a cameo brooch that had been in the family for 3 generations. Each piece felt like betrayal, but survival required sacrifice. Thursday afternoon, she met the pawnbroker in the small parlor, her hands shaking as she laid treasures on the table. Mr. Davies examined each piece with professional detachment, quoting prices that made her want to weep. The silver service alone should fetch. The parlor door opened. Sterling stood in the doorway, still in riding clothes, clearly having come directly from some appointment. His gaze moved from Naomi to the pawnbroker to the family heirloom spread across the table. Understanding dawned in his expression. Then something else. Something that looked like fury, but not directed at her. "Mr. Davies, isn't it?" Sterling's voice was dangerously quiet. "I believe this transaction is concluded. Leave your card. If Miss Martinez requires your services in future, she'll contact you." The pawnbroker recognized authority when he heard it. He departed hastily. Silence filled the room. Naomi couldn't meet Sterling's eyes, humiliation burning through her. "The first payment hasn't cleared," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a creditor demanding £2,000 by tomorrow, or he'll seize the house. I had no choice." "You had choices. You chose not to tell me. This isn't your problem." "Isn't it?" He moved closer, his expression unreadable. "What's the total amount owed?" "Sterling, I can't." "What's the amount, Naomi?" The use of her first name, spoken gently, broke something inside her. 2,000 to Grimshaw, another 800 to smaller creditors, but the agreement was that your mother would— "My mother's bank draft is delayed by incompetent clerks. Meanwhile, you're selling your grandmother's silver." His jaw tightened. "Give me the creditors' names and amounts. I'll handle it." "Absolutely not. I won't accept—" "This isn't charity." His voice turned cold, though his eyes remained warm. "You're publicly attached to me. If creditors show up at your door, if your family faces ruin, it reflects poorly on my judgment. Society will question why I'd allow my fiancée's family to suffer. Consider it protecting my own interests." "That's a convenient excuse?" "Perhaps." Something flickered across his face. "But it's the excuse I'm offering. Take it and preserve your pride, or refuse and lose everything. Your choice." The logic was flawless. The lie was transparent. They both knew this was kindness masquerading as pragmatism, but Sterling was giving her a way to accept help without admitting she needed it. 3 days, she whispered. "I'll repay you within—" "There's nothing to repay. Anonymous benefactors are wonderfully untraceable." He turned toward the door, then paused. "Naomi, you're not alone in this. Stop acting like you are." He left before she could respond, leaving her surrounded by family heirlooms she wouldn't have to sell, and the crushing weight of a debt that had nothing to do with money. She'd promised herself she wouldn't care about him. That promise was becoming impossible to keep. Lady Thornbury had the predatory instincts of a hunting falcon and twice the cruelty. She cornered Naomi at Lady Pemberton's garden party, backing her against a rose trellis with the precision of a practiced interrogator. "Miss Martinez, how delightful to finally speak privately." Her smile was all teeth. "I've been dying to hear more about your courtship with the Duke. Such a romantic story, the gallery, the art, the meeting of minds." She paused, her eyes sharp. "Though I confess I'm puzzled. I have it on excellent authority that Sterling was in Scotland during the weeks you claim to have met. Something about estate business?" Naomi's throat went dry. The timeline may be slightly— And no one seems to have seen you together before the announcement. Not at the theatre, not at any balls, nowhere." Lady Thornbury leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspirator's whisper. "Tell me, my dear, how does one conduct an entire courtship in complete invisibility? It's almost as though it never happened at all." "We valued discretion. Or perhaps there's another explanation. I've heard the most interesting rumors about your family's finances. Quite dire straits, I understand. And then suddenly, mysteriously, creditors are being paid off." Her smile turned vicious. One might wonder about the source of such sudden wealth. Panic clawed at Naomi's chest. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every careful lie was unraveling before her eyes. "One might wonder," a cold voice said from behind them, "why you're harassing my fiancée with tedious speculation, Lady Thornbury." Sterling materialized beside Naomi, his expression carved from ice. He didn't touch her, but his presence felt like armor. Lady Thornbury's smile faltered. "Your Grace, I was merely—" Making accusations? Spreading gossip? Choose your words carefully. He stepped closer to Lady Thornbury, his voice dropping to a tone Naomi had never heard before. Soft, absolutely merciless. I would hate for your own family's recent difficulties to become public knowledge. Your son's gambling debts in particular. What was the amount? £15,000. And the matter with that actress in Covent Garden. What was her name? Molly something? Lady Thornbury went white. You wouldn't test me. Sterling's smile didn't reach his eyes. Continue your tedious speculation about my private affairs and discover exactly what I'm willing to do to protect them. Or accept that my engagement is none of your concern and we'll all maintain our pleasant fictions. Your choice. Lady Thornbury fled like a ship abandoning a sinking rat. Sterling turned to Naomi, his expression softening. Are you all right? She wasn't. She was shaking, her carefully maintained composure shattered. She knows, or suspects. Sterling, this is going to destroy you. She suspects nothing she can prove. But she's right. We weren't together. The timeline doesn't work. Someone will discover... Naomi's voice cracked. I should end this. Break the engagement publicly. Say I realized we didn't suit. You'll be embarrassed briefly, but better than... No. The word was final. Absolute. Sterling, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Something fierce burned in his eyes. You think I care what Lady Thornbury speculates, that I'm worried about gossip? He caught her hands, the first time he'd touched her so deliberately outside of performance. Naomi, I'm not letting you fall on your sword to protect me from a scandal that may never materialize. But if it does, then we'll face it together. His grip tightened. You're not alone in this. Stop trying to be. The words echoed what he'd said days ago, but the context was different now. The look in his eyes was different. This wasn't about protecting his interests or maintaining appearances. This was personal. I don't understand, Naomi whispered. Why are you... Because I... He stopped, something like panic crossing his face as he realized what he'd almost said. Because we made an agreement. 3 months. I'm a man of my word. But Naomi had seen his expression before he caught himself. She knew what he hadn't said. The danger hadn't driven them apart. It had made the impossible truth unavoidable. Neither of them wanted this to end. 11 weeks and 6 days. Naomi had counted every one, watching the calendar with the dread of someone approaching an execution date. Tomorrow night, the grand ball at Blackwood House, followed by their carefully orchestrated realization that they didn't suit. The perfect ending to a perfect lie. She was folding the contract back into its hiding place when Clara appeared in her doorway. What is that? Her sister's voice was small, uncertain. Naomi's hands froze. Clara, it's nothing. But Clara had already crossed the room, plucking the document from nerveless fingers. She read in silence, her expression transforming from confusion to horror, to something worse. Betrayal. You've been lying. Clara's voice shook. All of it. The engagement, the courtship, everything. You sold yourself to his mother for money. I did it for us. For you. For me. Clara's laugh was bitter. You think I want a future built on lies, that I want to make my debut knowing it was purchased with deception? Tears streamed down her face. You've become everything father was, choosing easy dishonesty over hard truth. The words struck like a physical blow. That's not fair. Isn't it? You're lying to everyone, including Sterling, the man you claim to care about. Clara's eyes were red but fierce. End it. Tonight. Tell him the truth and end it. We'll face whatever comes with our integrity intact, or we'll face it with nothing at all. She left, the door clicking shut with devastating finality. Naomi sat on her bed, the contract heavy in her hands, and didn't sleep at all. Morning came too quickly. She dressed mechanically, her borrowed ball gown, ivory silk with gold embroidery, feeling like a costume for a play that had run too long. The ball wasn't until evening, but she arrived at Blackwood House early, desperate to speak with Sterling privately before the Sati performance began. She found Vivian instead. "Naomi, darling, you're early. Excellent. We need to talk." Vivian caught her arm, steering her into a small sitting room with the gentle force of someone who'd spent decades getting her way. "I know what you're planning. You don't know. You're going to confess. End the engagement honorably before tonight's farce." Vivian's expression was unusually vulnerable. "Please don't. Not because of the arrangement, but because I was wrong about what this was." Naomi stared at her. "What?" "I thought I was hiring you to play a role. Instead, I accidentally—" Vivian laughed, the sound almost sad. "I watch you two together, the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. The way you unconsciously move toward him in crowded rooms. This stopped being pretense weeks ago. That's why I have to tell him the truth." "What truth?" "That it started as a transaction. He'll forgive that. Sterling's rigid, but he's not cruel." Vivian gripped both Naomi's hands. "What he won't forgive is you walking away because you're afraid. Stay. Give this a genuine chance. The engagement may have been false, but what you've built together isn't." "My sister says I've compromised every principle." "Your sister is 17 and sees the world in absolutes. You're 27 and know that sometimes survival requires compromise." Vivian's voice softened. "Sometimes the bravest thing isn't confession. It's allowing yourself to be happy despite how it started." Footsteps in the hallway. Sterling's voice, speaking with servants about the evening's arrangements. Naomi was trapped between impossible choices. Clara's demand for immediate truth, Vivian's plea for patience, Sterling's right to honesty, and her own treacherous heart that wanted nothing more than to stay exactly where she was. "I need to speak with him," she whispered. "Before tonight. He deserves to choose." "Then choose carefully what you say," Vivian warned, "because once words are spoken, they can't be unspoken." The ballroom blazed with candlelight and crystal, hundreds of guests swirling in perfect choreographed chaos. Naomi moved through it like a ghost, smiling mechanically, responding to congratulations she didn't deserve. Tonight was supposed to be the end, the graceful conclusion to an elaborate lie. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, uncertain whether to jump or retreat. "Naomi." Sterling's voice cut through the noise. "A moment. The library." Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. Her chance to confess before the evening dissolved into farce. She followed him through corridors she'd come to know too well, into the library where this had all begun. Sterling closed the door, his expression unreadable. Before she could speak, he said, "I know the truth." The world tilted. "What?" "About the arrangement, the money, all of it." He moved to the window, his back to her. "My valet has been in service to this family for 30 years. He told me everything 3 weeks after the announcement. My mother's scheme, the contract, the payment." Naomi couldn't breathe. "You've known this entire time?" "Not the entire time, but yes, for weeks." The betrayal cut deeper than she'd imagined possible. "Then everything since then, all of it was just you playing along with the farce, making the best of an impossible situation." Her voice broke. "God, I'm such a fool." "You're not hearing me." Sterling turned, and something in his expression stopped her spiraling thoughts. "I knew, and I stayed anyway. I've been trying to find a way to tell you that this stopped being an arrangement for me weeks ago." He crossed the room, stopping just before her. "I don't care how it started, Naomi. I care how it continues." "I don't understand." "The second payment. The £2,500 my mother promised." He pulled a bank draft from his pocket. "It's yours. Regardless of what you choose tonight, your family's debts are settled. There's no obligation, no contract, nothing binding you here except choice." She stared at the paper, then at him. Why would you? Because I need you to choose freely. Not because you're being paid, not because you're trapped, not because society expects it. His voice dropped, became almost desperate. Because you want to, because this... He gestured between them. Whatever this has become, it's real for me. You challenge me, frustrate me, make me reconsider certainties I've held for years. You're brilliant and stubborn and far too principled for your own good. Something like a smile ghosted across his face. You're also the only person I've ever wanted to talk to at those interminable society functions. The only one whose opinion I genuinely care about. The only one I... He stopped, swallowed. The only one I love. The words hung in the air between them, terrifying and perfect. I'm flawed, he continued. Difficult. Rigid about principles I should probably be more flexible on, but I'm asking, not as a duke, not as part of any arrangement, if you'll consider staying, not for 3 months, permanently. Naomi's vision blurred with tears. I came here tonight to confess, to give you the choice of how to end this. My sister said building a future on lies was unconscionable. Then we'll build something new. Sterling caught her hands. Not on lies, but on the truth we've discovered. That we're better together than apart. That we challenge each other to be more than we were. That love doesn't require a perfect beginning, only an honest continuation. I was so afraid, she whispered, that you'd never forgive the deception. The deception brought you into my life. How can I condemn what gave me this? He brushed tears from her cheeks with unexpected gentleness. Naomi Martinez, will you marry me? Not because my mother arranged it, but because I'm asking. She laughed through tears. Yes. God, help me. Yes. He kissed her then. Not the chaste performance they'd maintained for society, but something real and overwhelming and entirely theirs. When they returned to the ballroom, hand in hand, something had shifted. The guests noticed. How could they not? The way Sterling looked at her, the way she leaned into him, the unmistakable truth of genuine connection. They danced, and this time it wasn't performance. It was beginning. Across the room, Vivian watched with tears she didn't bother hiding. Clara, who'd arrived late after considerable soul-searching, saw her sister's expression and understood. Sometimes the right choice emerged from wrong beginnings. Society got its fairy tale, never knowing the complicated, messy, beautiful truth beneath the polished surface. 6 months later, St. George's Chapel was filled with flowers and afternoon light. The wedding was small, family, close friends, no spectacle. Naomi walked down the aisle in her grandmother's dress, carefully restored with money honestly earned, toward a man who waited with uncharacteristic nervousness. No contracts, no arrangements, no lies. Just 2 people who'd found love in the most unlikely place and chose, every day, to keep it. When Sterling lifted her veil, his hand trembled slightly. Still sure about this? Every day, she whispered. For the rest of our lives. They kissed to applause, and somewhere in the pews, Vivian smiled, satisfied with her matchmaking despite its unconventional methods. Love, it turned out, cared very little about how it began, only about where it led. Dear listeners, thank you for staying with us until the end. If this story moved you, please subscribe, like, comment, and share it with someone close to you. Your support inspires us to keep creating stories filled with love, healing, and unforgettable twists.